morning. Good 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 morning. Here are the names. Good morning, Tammy and Leah. Hey, Leah. Good morning, Irie. Welcome back. Welcome back. Good morning, Darla. Good morning. Y'all, I'm so hungry. I have to munch while we're talking this morning. Good morning. Good morning, Kim. Happy homecoming. Happy HU homecoming, Kim. Happy VUU homecoming as well. Winston-Salem State, all the HBCUs this weekend. Happy homecoming. Good morning. Good morning, Brooke, Rihanna, Dana, Sadea, girl. Good morning. Good morning, Yolanda. Good morning, Devon and Mia. Good morning. Just giving folk. Oh my God, y'all, I'm so hungry. I mean, you ever just wake up hungry? Well, all right. Morning. Morning, morning, morning. Come on in the room. All righty, all righty. Well, good morning, everyone. It is good to see. Let me move over this way where I'm used to. See, it's good to see you all. Want to be on here very briefly. Good morning, Soror. Very briefly this morning. As you can see, I'm on location. Location meaning that I have been at homecoming. Hey, Whitney, you can hear my voice is a little hoarse. And Alice Walker's four-part definition of a woman is, I think it's probably in part 2, where Dr. Stacy Floyd Thomas sort of condenses it to understand it as traditional communalism, the tenet of womanism, where Walker states that womanists are concerned about the survival of an entire people, and separates herself, however, from moments of self-care. And so this weekend has been a moment of self-care. Audre Lorde, the Lord, my Lord of Lords, says to us that self-care is not simply about good morning, we miss seeing you still standing. That self-care is not just about self-indulgence, like indulging, and that even, I'm going to add to this, that even, pleasure, I know that we are all on the pleasure principle. Y'all see what I did there? And that is important and necessary. But my understanding of what the Lord is saying, Audrey, that is that self-care is an act of self-preservation. And self-preservation is a political act, political warfare even. Politics are about power. The body politics, sexual politics are about power and about agency. And so when we engage in acts of, this is why it can't only be about self-indulgence. This is why, while it is important for me aesthetically and other reasons to do things like get your hair done, get your nails done, get a massage, and also it cannot like only be, so it can be at a base level of pleasure, but the pleasure insofar as that my agency, that my voice is pleased because it has space, because it is taking up space. In the words of poet Tony Jones, take up space, sis. Thank you, Dr. Anika. It takes one to know one. And so this getaway for me, which is why I won't be on long, at least I don't think I will, has been I needed to breathe my people in. Ashe, sometimes you need, not sometimes, most times we need to be around the folk. And if you are around the folk for any period of time, you will often leave saying, I received what I didn't even know that I needed. And so I am here. There will be, I've sent a message to all of the village keepers that while we will not be on a live clearing, I just did want to jump on. Yes, this is the post-homecoming voice. It owes me nothing, y'all. It owes me nothing. So much so that this week also, I'm getting to what I want to meditate on, but let me just talk my way through it before I get on this here road. So I request your prayers for safe traveling for everyone traveling to and fro highways, byways, trailways, airways. That dang, man, I'm getting ready to go somewhere else, but I came on to talk about something else, but something else is coming. So just indulge me for a few seconds. Being back home in Richmond, Virginia, home where I spent 5 years of my life, home where I, upon arrival, did not know the history of the institution that I would be matriculating through because I had not yet been empowered with that knowledge. I want to say for the entire time I matriculated, I had no idea the history that Maria Lumpkin, who was a formerly enslaved woman, who the history books say was married to her owner. I won't suggest that there was not, I question that, but, there were also ways that enslaved people negotiated space. After this enslaved owner died, he bequeathed the land of his land to his wife slash property. Maria Lumpkin then became the proprietor, the owner of what was known as Lumpkin's Jail. Lumpkin's Jail sits at the bottom of what is called the Shockoe Bottoms area, which is right on the James River. The James River then would have been a trading post for those coming up from the Hampton Roads area, right around where enslaved folks, we find them in 1619. So this Richmond, and apart from Richmond being, the seat of Confederacy. So as enslaved people were emancipated, come on, y'all better name yourselves STVU. So as enslaved people were emancipating themselves, in search of freedom, Lumpkin's jail was where many of them who were caught were housed and placed in this horrible space. Nathaniel Culver, I really do have some other text for us to meditate on, but I'm compelled, Ashe. I think Maria, Maria, thank you, Dr. Russell, and for Sadiqa Johnson's The Yellow Wife. Ashe, thank you. I absolutely will be reading that. Nathaniel Culver, at the onset of emancipation, as many white, hey y'all, my Panther people, hey y'all, Nathaniel Culver, maybe this is what the Spirit wants me to talk about. I promised we was going to Hagar, but maybe I'm going to just park right here for a second. Nathaniel Culver was a well-meaning white man, like the many well-meaning white folks, whether it is Giles and Packard, the two white women missionaries who founded Spelman College. I mean, we can begin to name on, but who said, whether it was the General Howard, for whom Howard is named after, as enslaved people are emancipated, well-meaning Christian white folk of the North headed south to begin to train formerly enslaved folk in further domestication. Right, Kim. Come on and help me, Dr. Russell. Oh my God, you help me connect it. And so, Nathaniel comes down with a small grant from one of the Baptist, I think it's American Baptist Home, something, with the, in search of a place to host his school. And he, like many, went to churches looking for land, and no one would give him land to host this school for newly freed black folk. And he is going to teach them how to clean and how to sew better and how to be a part of society. All of this is air quotes. And he goes to a meeting, and shout out to my professor, Dr. Hilton, who has written extensively on this, has written a book on the history of Virginia Union University. So shout out to you, Dr. Hilton. And he goes to a meeting, and he is introduced to Maria Lumpkin, the formerly enslaved person who is now the owner of some land, and upon that land is a jail where enslaved people, her people, were brutalized, were held in captivity. This becomes then, she meets Nathaniel. Nathaniel pleads his case, and Maria says, Mary says, you can host your school right here on my property in Lumpkin's jail. So the very first classroom for what will become Virginia Union University is in the one-room jailhouse, the post where enslaved people were chained to, now becomes the place where Virginia Union commences. I did not know this history upon coming to Virginia Union. I was in my own moment of flight from my, thank you, Holy Ghost. I'm gonna just lean into you all the way. Thank you. I was not aware. I was in flight from many things, much, I guess, like Hagar, who was in flight from a controlling mistress, who I think it's in 16 Genesis chapter 16, verse 2, depending on the translation, it reads, "And Sarah said to Abram, because Yahweh has prevented me from bearing children, go to my maid, and perhaps I shall be built up from her." And perhaps I shall be built up from her. That's the line right there that gets us into what womanist theologian Dolores Williams talks to us about this idea of surrogacy, that Sarah believed that she could be built up, the weightiness of it, to be built up by her Egyptian handmaiden, i.e. Egyptian slave. And at some point, Hagar runs away. She takes flight. Let me get back to this part of the story. I was taking flight from my own space of confusion. Some of you have heard this story before. You have heard me testify, and in that testimony is that because of trauma that I would not have identified then as trauma, I am not, come on, Dr. Russell, teach us in these comments, because I would not have I did not have the language to say trauma. And the truth of the matter is, even if I did have the language, I'm not sure that I would have ever said it out of allegiance and respect for the people who raised me. My goodness. Because if we will tell the truth about it, there is a way in which, when it comes to telling our own story, some of us experience guilt, because to tell our story is to place in questionable light some of the people, some of the spaces that we love the most. But I want to say to you that sharing your story, acknowledging your trauma, does not suggest that you don't love and or respect, but back to the Lord, who says that this kind of self-care is an act of self-preservation, that the only way we can be preserved is to live in our truth, to identify what some might seem as uncomely, to turn the light on, to open the casket, to tell the truth, and to say that two things can be true at one time. It could be true that I grew up in a loving family. It absolutely is true that I grew up getting what I believed materially was everything I needed and a lot of things that I wanted. It could be true, and was, that folk in my family, including my mother and my grandmother, sacrificed much for me. It is absolutely true. There are no lies detected. None, absolutely. And yet at the same time, it is also true that I experienced some things, that I witnessed some things that are mine, Ashe, that are a part of my story, and that it is okay for me to express, to do the work, to exorcise my body from those things that are held in me. And so coming to Virginia Union University, my goodness, I was in flight with no particular destination. The entirety, God, thank you. You just said, I just want you to testify this morning. And that's what I'm going to do. Ashe, Spirit. And coming to Virginia Union for me then was a way of escape that I didn't know I needed. The entirety of my school career, I don't ever recall. I won't say it is not so. I'm just saying I don't recall. I don't recall being on the honor roll. I don't recall being student of the month. You don't hear me. I don't recall these things. But the more that I think about it, God, today, the more that I think about it, the more that I'm like, yeah, and how could you? How could you, out of respect for the parts of my mother's story that are her own to share, but how could you? When would you have had the time? When you were negotiating, my goodness, when you were negotiating, and then not just all on other folks, but when you became of an age and you started searching for what you didn't have in your space, searching coupled with experimental adolescence can sometimes be a kind of combustion that is filled with trauma. And so by the time I got to high school, everyone, all the things on my report card used to say, if she would just apply herself. She come to class late all the time. She's disruptive because she talks. And they would say make disruption sound as if I would be standing in front of the class and just disrupting everybody. When really the disruption would be my challenge about the assignment, my challenge about what we were reading, my challenge, my question that adults who did not have the language to understand a womanish girl with agency, with the ability to question, would see that as being challenged. My goodness. And so by the time 12th grade arrives, my mother has already moved to Miami in flight in search of her escape. She needed to run for her life, and amen, I'm glad she did. But in running in search of safety, in search of her own self-preservation, and running and moving, and even in a way trying to escape me, trying to escape my grandmother, trying to escape my father, and other folk who were unwilling to see her own agency, who for whom her entire life had looked over her, had looked through her, had misplaced her, has displaced her. She arrived to a place in her life where if she did not leave at that appointed time, I'm not sure that I would be able to tell you that my mama is 73 today. But in her leaving, remember y'all, two things can be true at once. In her leaving, she certainly invited me to come. But who in their 12th grade year, who in the place that they have been born into, raised into, who in a mind that is not yet fully shaped, that is really not able to cast a vision far beyond to see what could be, who wants to go to from the north to a space like Miami? And if you've ever been to Miami, if you are ever really familiar with South Florida, then you know it really should be the United States of Miami. Miami is its own country, fit with diverse cultures, diverse representations of the African diaspora. But who? And so I opted to stay back. But in staying back, only y'all, once I started doing my own healing journey, in staying back, I recognized that hurt me in a way, that I had a sense of abandonment. And while my mother would never characterize saving her own life as abandonment, in that work, I had to share and help her see why it may not feel like you abandoned me on your part, but on my part, two things can be true. You could love me fiercely. You could die for me. You could give your last breath for me. You could sacrifice it all for me, and at the same time, you could abandon me. So here's this Virginia Union. Here is this college story. Here is me now watching other classmates apply to college. Here is me watching and wondering, when will my opportunity come? Where am I going? And I started applying with no guidance, no free application week, no common app era, no internet then. You used to have to call the college admissions office. Some of y'all are old enough to know. You would have to call the college admissions office and ask them to send you an application. I got an application. I'd only done one college tour, and that was of HBCUs of the North. So I went to Lincoln, I went to Cheney, and I went to Dell State. I'd never known any of the HBCUs down south, but I start calling the ones that I'd heard about. I called Howard and asked for an application. I called Florida A&M and asked for an application. I called Hampton University and asked for an application. I called Knoxville and asked for an application. Friends, and all of the Florida Memorial for an application. And I began to handwrite this application. I wish that I could get a copy of the essay that I wrote. I just want to see what it said. And one by one, these responses from these institutions came back and said, "Thank you so much for your application. Unfortunately, my God, today, unfortunately, at this time, we are unable to offer you admittance to our university. Best wishes with your future." Oh, one after one after one. And then we had Virginia Union University. I only knew about Virginia University because my friend Channy and my friend Tina, two folks from my hometown, from my church, from my hometown, were current students. And they said, "You should apply to Virginia Union." I said, "Well, shoot, if y'all there, let me see what's good." Y'all, I just want to say thank you, God. I applied to Virginia Union and got accepted to Virginia Union. And if you hadn't picked up by now that it was the only institution, it was the only university that accepted me. The one who said, "Congratulations, we are pleased to offer you admittance to our university." I had not been able to connect the dots that I had a family lineage here in Richmond, that my uncle was the first African American detective, James Robinson, here in Richmond, that my cousin Ronnie Robinson was one of the first to graduate in the first law class where Black people graduated at Emory University, became a foreign services officer, that my cousin Rita Jane Robinson, a lifetime member of Delta Sigma Theta, spent over 40 years, what is that called? Oversby Elementary School here in Richmond, Virginia, a graduate of Virginia State University. I didn't even know the wealth that I'd already had roots here in Richmond. And clearly, if I didn't know that, friend, then you must know that back then they weren't doing a great job of connecting our history, the history of the institution, with the history of enslaved people. I had no idea, y'all, that the grounds, the hallowed grounds that I was walking on, I had no idea that there was a collective lineage of one of Mary Lumpkin that called me to this space. I had no idea that I would be who I am, that I would become who I was, that there was a legacy, an ancestral witness. I had no idea that there were people calling my name in the spirit. I had no idea that I was being summoned to this place. I had no idea that there had been a place that was prepared for me. I had no idea that I would become the Reverend Doctor from an institution whose legacy was born and birthed for those who were seeking and desiring to live out the call, that it was a space and a place for those who would become Baptist preachers. I had no idea that it was the ultimate setup. I had no idea that this would be the place that I would matriculate in, even in my days of walking those grounds, even in my partying at the Hendo, in my partying at Uptown Avery's Lounge, in my partying at DJ's and the Slip and Club Z, in my going to the step shows in Barco Stevens Gym, in my moving around the Dust Bowl at Gold Bowl, in my walking from the C.D. King building down, oh, you Union Knights remember, from the C.D. B.D. King building, down past the Maggie Walker building, from the Dust Bowl where the library now stands, onto the main campus, I had no idea that my future would be what it is. I had no idea that when I was unable, hey God, when I was just searching, when I was just sort of flopping around in search of myself, in search of any garden, not just my mother's garden, in search of anybody's garden. And sometimes, friends, when you are just in search of anybody's garden, you let anybody else water your garden. And so when I was in search, just letting any folk water this treasured garden, Jesus, I had no idea that the hallowed grounds and dear old walls, may they forever be, that it would be the launch pad that it would be the launch pad. That it would be the launch pad, and rightfully so. The foundation to move me from places and into spaces that this girl fleeing from bondage, upset with those for whom she believed had charge over her, come on, Hagar, would find herself in. And so I guess I came here to say, I guess I came here to say thank you. Wow. This was not the plan. I guess I came here to say thank you, Mary Lumpkin. For seeing, as it says in Hebrews 11:13, for seeing it in the distance. For seeing me and many like me in the distance. I guess I came here to say thank you to the institution that made space for me and so many others. To the institution for whom at one point that it was their it was the unspoken thing that, Virginia, you ain't accept anybody, they'll take you. And I've never been ashamed of that. But I guess I just simply want to say, I'm not speaking to leadership. I'm not speaking to that. I'm speaking to the institution. I'm speaking to the material space. Because y'all know spaces hold memory. Spaces like people embody memory. To what was the Virginia Seminary, to what was Hartshorne Memorial College, to what becomes Virginia Union University. Moving around the campus this weekend, I felt the love from so many of you who said, I love Pink Road Chronicles. So many of you, of my peers at my home, who said, I watch you, sis, and I thank you. So many of you pouring back in. And as my friends and I walk some of the spaces, at one point, we saw our friend, a friend we've not seen since he left school and did not return. And the tears filled our eyes because no place can bring you back, in my opinion, like black places can, like black folks can. You can step in a place and my God, can you just return to yourself? And the tears filled our eyes because we hadn't seen this person and we knew life had brought some hard times to this person. Hey, my goodness. And the space that was prepared for me, my God, the space that was prepared for me, that without it, there would be no Howard. No. And there would be no Emory. Nope. There might be a wake, but not with the foundation that I have right now. And so I simply want to say, next week, I'll come back to this Hagar text, although I know Dr. Professor Kimberly Russell has preached it already in the chat, which I look forward to coming back to read. I simply want to say that coming home, yes, Sister Omelika, and this is why I say HBCU homecoming season. You know how people say, Christmas is the holidays, the most wonderful time of the year. HBCU homecoming season is the absolute most wonderful time of the year. It is a return to self. It is being faced with those but God moments. It is looking at a place and saying, child, but God blesses babies and fools. And honey, it is, oh my goodness, I should be dead and sleeping in my grave. Yes, it is also, shout out to Sandra Burrell, y'all Pantherites, y'all who were present during my time. Y'all remember Miss Burrell, the administrative assistant in student affairs. And if you ain't never known an administrator at a HBCU, if you ain't never known the person who cleaned your dorms, the person who served you your food, shame on you, because that's who really runs the institution. Y'all, I ran into Miss Burrell and I like to scream. Why? I did scream. Why? Because Sandra Burrell, when you watch this, saved my life. She was my work study supervisor. She gave me a job in the office. And when I was going through relationship woes, she would sit me down in my office and tell me, get yourself together. You out there looking foolish. What's happening? She would make sure that we ate. Y'all, I'm telling you, these are our spaces. Now here comes the plea, like a good preacher. And because these are our spaces, yes, Noel, she kept us. Because these are our spaces, it is our responsibility. Pen right there. When so many of us revive the call of our elder comrade, Assata Shakur, a few years ago, written in her text, her letter called A Letter to My People in 1971. When we retrieve the chant, it is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and respect each other, for we have nothing to lose but our chains. When many of us started chanting that again, it is our duty to fight for our freedom. freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and protect each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. Might I suggest to you that part of that duty is maintaining our institution via our finances. Now hear me really good. Hear me really good. Yeah, go ahead with drop the names of the people who kept you. We are tied to some of us don't give because the leadership is questionable. No argument from me. The leadership in many of our institutions is questionable. They are drunk with the wine of the world, in that they are drunk with the wine of the world of material gain. They have sipped the syrup from the oppressive folk, from the dominant culture, from capitalism. They are stuck deep in with individualism. They are not Afri-centered. Their values do not align with the values of those who created these institutions. They create backroom doors, backroom deals. They come up with all kinds of interesting and creative ways to manipulate finances. And because they come up with these creative ways, they are top heavy in administration, that all of the high salaries are paid to those who administrate, when for those who serve in the form of teaching and or other spaces at our HBCUs can barely live without having a side hustle. And those of us who come out of institutions like big houses on plantations cannot afford to work in the field. You get what I'm saying? We cannot afford to work in the field because in the field, the resources are questionable. In the field, the pay is low for triple the work. So many of us are forced to stay in the big house. Many of us are forced to stay in the big house so that we can afford to live, so that we can afford to pay back the student loans that we took out to matriculate through the institutions. Meanwhile, because it is so top heavy with folk who are underqualified, with folk who live and possess a kind of greed, with folk who are opaque and not transparent about the way they are leading and about the way they are using the money. Hence, folk now have a bad taste in their mouths, just like the preacher. Amen and ashe. And folks now want to know, if I give my money, where is my money going to? So here's what I just want to end with, friends. I can't promise where the money is going. I can't tell you. But what I can say though is, if you submit, if you give through your local, through the alumni affairs office of your institution, and if you write on that check, or if you write on that letter that I want this to go to student scholarships. How about this? Here's a novel idea. Why don't you make up your own scholarship? That's what I did. Listen, this scholarship is for students from X, Y, and Z who have this kind of GPA, who have this kind of background, and every year I want this to go to them. If you name it, if you put it on there, then it should go to. And then guess what? Then you get to call every year. How much is in the account? How much is in the scholarship account that I have set up? That's how you keep it honest. I won't say that it's bulletproof, but I'll simply say, because these institutions were born out of a space, we have to do more than just show up for homecoming. We have to do more than to just show up for tailgate. We have to do more to be a witness about our HBCUs other than having our red solo cups and hugging necks. We gonna have to open up these purses and these wallets. We gonna have to do estate planning and leave stuff to our institution, because that's what the folk in the big house do. You know what the folk in the the big house do for homecoming? Homecoming for folks in the big house is all about raising funds. You don't hear me today. Homecoming for folks in the big house is all about raising funds. The whole point of coming home is that you're going to bring your checkbook with you. The whole point of coming home is that when you leave, we know you're going to leave some dollars for us. But the reason I suggest that many of our HBCUs are in the situations that they are in is one, because of questionable leadership. Yeah. Folks are in presidencies and vice presidencies and all other kinds of things and chairs of board who don't have no business being in those positions. Why? Not just because I'm not saying they bad people. They have no experience. This ain't church. And for the longest time, we have run our institutions like we run a church, meaning there is a patriarchal head. And at the head, oh my God, at the head is usually a being who is operating in a way that is non-inclusive, that does not value the voice and the leadership of all, and who got their hands in the pockets of others. I want to say, as alums of these institutions, we have voice, but your voice won't be heard if you ain't doing no giving. So I'm ending this way. I guess this was, Whitney, a homecoming message for all of our folk, all of our HBCU alums. What are you giving? I'm talking to me too, because I have given, but it's been sporadic. Meaning, I did create the scholarship. I created the scholarship, but through someone I know on campus, whose name I won't mention because I don't want them getting in any trouble, I asked that person to identify a student because I wanted a direct give, Dr. Russell. And I said, identify a student who fits this. And I want you to get, this is my $500 contribution, and I want this student to have that. Yeah. And then on the days of giving, and here's the thing, for the amount of money that you spend if you come out of town for homecoming is the same amount of money you can sow. So maybe one year you skip, is the same amount of money that you can sow. I got this, your group chat, your alum group chat, for the, come on, y'all. Let's pool together 10, 15, 20. Some of you all in your group chat, you got enough to pull together $100 from each person every month. And at the end of the year, you can make your gift. My saying is that our institutions need us. There is no reason but for unscrupulous leadership. Yes. Greed. Yes. Yes. But also our inability to remember how these institutions start, to remember that whether it was the crumpled up $5 bills in the hands of men and women in the church who created these spaces, built them brick by brick, cornerstone by cornerstone, and all we have to show for it is name brand handbags and shoes and cars, places and luxury places to live, while our institutions are crumbling down around us, where funding from the government is continuing to be challenged, but it is not their responsibility. Do you know that we are the stock market? Do you understand that we are the stock market, that we are the community with the most spending power, and that not only if we stop going to church one Sunday, but if we pulled back from